Yeah, Dartitis is it's a psychological disorder that, in the absence of any physical trauma, manifests itself in a catastrophic breakdown, really, of the movement required to throw a dart consistently. And usually this throwing movement is a well-rehearsed, well-practiced skill.
Where it takes me, something I struggle with now with just a pure straight barrel is that the placement of the hand on the barrel has to be the same every time, and right now it's sometimes a little bit more on the front, a little on the back. So
he was once called the Dutch Dragon, a rising star who looked unstoppable on the oche. In just a few years, Jules van Dongen went from casual games in Missouri basements to ranking among the most in-form darts players on the planet. But now, he's battling averages in the 60 seconds, breaking down in tears mid-match, and fighting something far more devastating than just poor form. How does a player climb so fast only to fall even harder? And more importantly, can Jules find a way back? Or is this the end of his story on the world stage? Jules van Dongen's story doesn't begin under the bright lights of the PDC. It starts in the Netherlands in 1990, long before anyone would call him the Dutch Dragon. As a kid, he wasn't dreaming about trophies or walk-on music. He was just a boy with a dartboard in his room, more interested in throwing darts to avoid homework than to become a professional athlete. His parents thought it was just a harmless distraction, a way to keep him busy. But those hours of casually throwing at the board planted the seed of something much bigger. Unlike many of the game's future stars, Jules didn't grow up chasing junior titles or traveling the country for youth competitions. In fact, darts was almost like a secret hobby, something he did in the background. His path looked completely different from the polished journeys of other professionals, and that's what makes his rise so unique. In 2013, Jules made a decision that changed the entire trajectory of his life. He left the Netherlands and moved to the United States. It wasn't a move for darts. He wasn't following a dream of becoming a pro. He was just chasing a new life, new opportunities, and a new start. Settling in Missouri, he worked in hospitality, clocking long hours that left little room for professional ambition. Darts, at that point, was just a side passion, a way to unwind with friends and connect with a small but dedicated community of players, many of them fellow Dutch expats who also found themselves far away from home. Those early years in America were far from glamorous. Jules played in local bars, amateur leagues, and small regional events that rarely offered more than bragging rights. He wasn't dominating or collecting titles. In fact, he had limited success. But what stood out wasn't the results, it was his persistence. Even without much recognition, he kept playing. And in the tight-knit US darts scene, his presence grew. What made Jules different from the average pub player was the way he approached the game. He treated it seriously, even when there wasn't much on the line. He experimented with his throw, tested new techniques, and built a style that combined his Dutch roots with the grit of American competition. And while most people around him probably saw him as just another decent player, he was slowly laying the foundation for something bigger. By the late 2010 seconds, Jules had carved out a reputation in the American darts community, a steady competitor with talent, even if his results didn't yet match his potential. Still, nothing suggested he'd become a global name. He wasn't a prodigy, he wasn't backed by sponsors, and he certainly wasn't on anyone's radar in Europe, where darts remained a much bigger, more competitive scene. But destiny has a way of catching people by surprise. For Jules, the turning point would arrive not because of careful planning or a steady climb through the ranks, but because of something no one in the world could have predicted: a global pandemic. Because when the world shut down in 2020, Jules suddenly had something he'd never had before time, and what he did with that time completely changed his career. Where Jules had been working practically collapsed overnight. For most people, it was a time of stress and uncertainty. But for Jules, the sudden free time opened a door he didn't even know was waiting for him. With work on hold, he turned back to the dartboard, this time not just to unwind, but to focus. Day after day, he practiced for hours, throwing until the game that once felt like a hobby began to feel like a calling. And with the boom of online darts during lockdown, he had a platform to test himself against a wider pool of players, pushing him to sharpen his game even further. It was during this period that he started to shape the identity fans know today. He adopted the nickname the Dutch Dragon, a nod to both his heritage and the fiery style he was developing. And unlike before, his results began to show real promise. a casual Missouri bar player was transforming into something far more dangerous. By 2021, that transformation became impossible to ignore. Jules made his big breakthrough on the North American CDC Tour, one of the most important stepping stones for darts players outside Europe. In his very first year competing, he stunned the scene by reaching the semi-finals of a Q-School event, earning himself a CDC Tour card. For American darts fans, it was a shock. Here was a player many had seen grinding away in local leagues for years now, taking down seasoned names on a professional stage. And he wasn't just scraping by. At the CDC Match Play event that year, Jules delivered a statement performance, defeating none other than Larry Butler, a legend of the American darts scene, in the final. His victory wasn't lucky or scrappy, it was dominant. He posted a stunning 104 average in the semi-final, leaving fans and opponents equally stunned. Suddenly, the Dutch Dragon wasn't just a catchy nickname, he was living up to it. That same year, he also bagged multiple World Darts Federation titles, including wins at the Cherry Bomb International and the Charlotte and Seacoast Opens. By the end of 2021, Jules had collected more WDF titles than almost anyone else on the circuit. For a player who just a year earlier had been relatively unknown, it was a meteoric rise. And perhaps the most symbolic moment of his transformation came not on a televised stage, but on a webcam. In a Facebook-streamed game, Jules hit a perfect 9-darter, the holy grail of darts. It wasn't about prize money or rankings, it was about proving that he had reached a new level of ability, the kind that very few players in the world can even dream of. The hobbyist was gone. In his place stood a competitor who could scare anyone on his day, and with confidence growing and averages climbing into the mid-90 seconds, Jules set his sights higher, much higher. Because for Jules, dominating in North America wasn't enough. The real test was in Europe against the very best in the world, and in 2022, he crossed the ocean to prove he belonged. When Jules van Dongen arrived in Germany for PDC Q-School in 2022, he wasn't the favorite. He wasn't backed by hype or media attention. In fact, many European fans had barely heard his name. But that changed quickly. His Q-School campaign started in bizarre fashion, with one of the strangest wins in PDC history. On day one, his opponent threw just 3 darts, scored 18, and then forfeited the match, even bringing Jules a beer before leaving the stage. It was the easiest win of his career, and it made headlines for all the wrong reasons. But Jules didn't let the odds start distract him. He fought through the rounds, showed his quality, and by the end of the week, he had done enough to secure a 2-year PDC Tour card through the Order of Merit. For most players, that's a dream that never comes true. For Jules, it was confirmation that all the work, all the risk, and all the sacrifice had been worth it. He was no longer just a regional star, he was now on the biggest darts tour in the world, and right away, he showed glimpses of what he could do. At the UK Open, his first major appearance, Jules won a nail-biting debut match with a deciding leg checkout of 124, a finish that immediately put his name on the radar of fans who had never heard of him before. It wasn't just a win, it was a statement that he could deliver under pressure. That year, he also stepped onto the Euro Tour for the first time, defeating Brett Clayton 6-2 on his debut before falling to former world champion Rob Cross. His averages were solid, his confidence was growing, and fans were starting to see that the Dutch Dragon might just have what it takes to make an impact on the biggest stages. But with success came the harsh realities of the PDC grind. Over the course of the Players' Championship season, Jules's form wavered. His average across the year sat at 88.65, decent, but only the 103rd highest out of 129 players who competed regularly. He struggled to string wins together, often bowing out in the first round. At one point, he endured a brutal 13-match losing streak, a run that left him outside qualification for the Players' Championship finals and Ali Pali. His earnings that year? Just under £9,000 in ranking prize money, far below what was needed to make life sustainable as a full-time professional. It was a tough wake-up call. He had the talent, but consistency was proving elusive. Fans wondered, was this the ceiling for Jules? A promising player who could flash brilliance, but not survive the weekly grind of the PDC Tour. But just when it seemed his story might stall, something unexpected happened. Because in 2023, Jules van Dongen didn't just bounce back. He played the best darts of his life, and for a brief moment, he looked unstoppable. For most players, year one on the PDC Tour is about survival. Jules had learned quickly just how brutal the schedule could be, and by the start of 2023, the pressure was on. He needed results, he needed consistency, and above all, he needed to prove that the flashes of brilliance weren't just one-off moments. At first, things didn't look promising. Early in the season, the same problems from 2022 seemed to haunt him. First-round exits, patchy averages, and the feeling that he was always just one step behind. But then, almost out of nowhere, everything began to click. By September, Jules was on fire. In just a matter of weeks, he reached 3 Players' Championship last 16s in 5 events, racking up wins over established names and putting in averages well over the 100 mark. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was competing. And according to the official stats, Jules van Dongen was suddenly one of the 6 most informed players in the entire world. The transformation reached its peak at the German Championship. In his opening match, Jules dispatched Patrick Kovac with ease, setting up a showdown with Danny Noppert, a top-level player who many expected to sweep him aside. But what happened next shocked everyone. Jules averaged 101.32, crushing Noppert 6-2, even though Noppert himself played brilliantly with a ton average. It wasn't just a win, it was a dismantling, the kind of performance that makes fans sit up and say, this guy is the real deal. He eventually lost to Stephen Bunting in a deciding leg, but by then, the message was clear. The Dutch Dragon was dangerous, and his momentum carried him to the biggest stage in darts, the World Championship at Alexandra Palace, better known as Ali Pali. For any darts player, walking out in that arena is a dream come true. For Jules, it was proof of how far he'd come since those small events back in Missouri. He drew Darren Penhall in the first round, and on paper, it looked like a gift. Jules was the heavy favourite, listed at 1.42 odds. Fans expected him to cruise through, maybe even set up a deep run that could secure his tour card and launch him into the top ranks. But what happened instead was gutting. Jules never settled, averaging 90 but missing key moments at crucial times. Penhall punished him, and just like that, Jules' World Championship debut ended in a 3-1 defeat. The loss was more than just disappointing. It left Jules outside the Order of Merit cutoff, finishing the season ranked 78th. Despite playing some of the best darts of his life, he hadn't done enough to save his tour card. The highs of 2023, the ton-plus averages, the giant-killing performances suddenly meant very little. Jules was out. But just when it seemed like his career was slipping away, Jules got another chance. A new sponsor, a fresh tour card, and hidden beneath it all, the beginning of a struggle that would nearly break him. The end of 2023 should have been devastating, but early 2024 brought a glimmer of hope. Just weeks before Q School, Jules signed with Wanmao, one of the biggest dart manufacturers in the world. It was a huge deal, both financially and emotionally. For the first time, he had real backing. And with renewed confidence, he went into Q School, determined to win his place back on the PDC Tour. And he did exactly that. Within just 2 days, Jules had practically secured his return, earning a tour card once again through the Order of Merit. Fans were relieved and some even excited. This was a second chance, a chance to build on the form he had shown in late 2023 and finally establish himself as a consistent force. But behind the scenes, something was wrong. Jules revealed later that it was during that very Q School campaign that he started to feel something strange with his grip. His signature pre-throw twist, the movement that had defined his style, suddenly didn't feel right. At first he thought it was nothing, maybe just nerves, but as weeks went by, the problem only grew worse. His throw felt alien, his grip unreliable. He began to realize that what he was experiencing wasn't just a technical slump, it was Dartitis, one of the most feared conditions in darts. A cruel, almost inexplicable mental block that disrupts a player's ability to release the dart. It has ended careers before, and for Jules, it arrived at the worst possible time. As his grip faltered, so did his confidence. Matches that once felt winnable slipped away. Averages tumbled into the 80s, then into the 70s. Fans who had watched him dominate just months earlier were stunned to see him struggling to even hit consistent scores. And the issues weren't just on the board. Off it, Jules was facing even more pressure. His mother was ill and the stress left him unable to sleep properly. He admitted he was struggling mentally and eventually sought help from a sports psychologist. But by then, the damage to his form was obvious. Throughout 2024, Jules's results collapsed. He withdrew from multiple events, managed just 3 wins in the entire Players' Championship season, and ended with an average of 80.4. the lowest of any regular player on tour. His prize money fell to just £4,000, an amount so low that Jules himself later called on the PDC to rethink its prize structure for struggling professionals. At his lowest point, he released a video explaining his struggles. In it, he showed how he physically couldn't set the dart properly in his right hand anymore. With his thumb refusing to roll the way it needed to, he even considered switching to play left-handed. Fans were shocked, not just by the honesty of the video, but by how broken Jules seemed. This wasn't just a slump, it was a collapse. And for the first time, the question was being asked, could the Dutch Dragon even survive as a professional player? But the darkest moment was still to come, on a televised stage in front of thousands, when Jules's battle with Dartitis played out for the whole world to see. For most players, Dartitis is a nightmare whispered about in hushed tones, something you hear of happening to others, but never think will happen to you. For Jules, it became an inescapable reality. The confident, fluid throw that once carried him to ton-plus averages was gone, replaced by a hesitant, broken action that betrayed him on stage. By mid-2024, the signs were impossible to ignore. His averages were collapsing into the low 80s and at times even the 60s. Matches that should have been routine became painful to watch. He wasn't just losing, he was struggling to get through legs at all. He pulled out of multiple events, unable to cope with the frustration of his own throw betraying him. And when he did play, the results were disastrous. One event saw him post an average of just 62.3 in a 6-2 defeat. For a man who had once been ranked among the most informed players in the world, this was a fall few could have imagined. Fans watched in disbelief. Some wondered if it was all mental, others speculated about hidden injuries, but the truth was clear. Jules van Dongen was fighting Dartitis, and Dartitis was winning. What made it even harder was the financial side. Unlike the sports elite, lower-ranked professionals live event to event. With prize money drying up, Jules earned just £4,000 that season, a sum that barely covered travel costs, let alone the expenses of competing full-time. In frustration, he publicly called on the PDC to reconsider how money was distributed, arguing that the current system left struggling players with no support. But the most heartbreaking moment came not in his results, but in his own words. In late 2024, Jules posted a raw, unfiltered video explaining exactly what was happening to him. He showed how, with his right hand, he could no longer set the dart properly. His thumb simply wouldn't roll the way it needed to, no matter how hard he tried. Switching to his left hand, he demonstrated how easily he could control the dart, proof that his body wasn't broken, but his mind was betraying him. "It's probably 100% mental," he admitted, "but that doesn't change the fact that I can't do it." The honesty of that video struck fans deeply. It wasn't a polished PR piece or an excuse. It was a man at his lowest point, bearing his struggle for everyone to see. For many, it was the first time they truly grasped how devastating Dartitis can be. But as painful as the video was, it couldn't prepare anyone for what was about to happen next. Because in 2025, on one of darts' biggest stages, Jules' battle reached its most heartbreaking moment. A match that ended not with defeat, but with tears. The UK Open has always been known as the FA Cup of darts, unpredictable, emotional, and full of stories that fans never forget. For Jules van Dongen, his 2025 appearance became one of the saddest chapters in the tournament's history. Drawn against former UK Open champion Simon Stevenson, the matchup looked, on paper, winnable. In his prime, Jules would have been favoured, his scoring power enough to overwhelm a veteran whose best years were behind him. But from the very first throw, it was clear something was wrong. Gone was the trademark twist in Jules' release. Instead, he threw quickly, almost desperately, trying to avoid the hesitation that Dartitis forces on players. The result was wild, inaccurate darts that barely threatened the treble 20. Within minutes, Stevenson raced into a 3-0 lead as Jules' average hovered around 60. The crowd in Minehead, usually lively and rowdy, seemed to sense what was unfolding. They weren't watching a contest, they were watching a man unravel on stage. And then came the moment that no darts fan ever wants to see. Jules, visibly overwhelmed, broke down in tears mid-match. His face told the story better than any statistic could. This wasn't just about losing a game, it was about losing control of the very thing that defined his career. The match ended 6-0. Jules averaged just over 61, one of the lowest recorded on a major stage in recent memory. But as heartbreaking as the scoreline was, it was the image of him in tears, standing helpless in front of the dartboard that burned into the minds of everyone watching. After the match, fans flooded social media with messages of support. Some shared their own struggles with Dartitis, others simply urged him not to give up. The response was overwhelmingly sympathetic. It wasn't ridicule or criticism, it was compassion. People understood they were watching not just a sporting struggle, but a personal battle. Jules himself later thanked fans for the support, admitting that he was trying his best but struggling to cope. He even joked online about his form, calling himself Mr. Consistency, a darkly humorous reference to his steady run of low averages. For many, the breakdown at the UK Open drew inevitable comparisons to Barry van Peer, another talented player who famously broke down with Dartitis on a televised stage years earlier. Van Peer eventually fought his way back and now competes at a high level again. The question is, can Jules do the same? As things stand, the numbers are bleak. Between 2022 and 2023, Jules averaged a healthy 90.3, but since 2024, that number has plummeted to just over 81 and continues to fall. He hasn't averaged over 90 since April 2024. The talent is still there, everyone knows it, but whether he can overcome the mental block is a mystery. So where does this leave the Dutch Dragon? Is his story one of wasted potential, or could his biggest battle lead to his greatest comeback? For many players, breaking down in tears on stage would have been the end, a moment too painful to recover from. But Jules van Dongen didn't disappear after the 2025 UK Open. He kept turning up, match after match, trying to fight through the nightmare that Dartitis had turned his career into. The results, though, have been brutal. Since that heartbreaking night against Simon Stevenson, Jules's averages have barely lifted. In Players' Championship events, he's been stuck in the mid to high 60 seconds, often crashing out in the very first round. Euro Tour qualifiers brought little relief, 4 attempts, 4 first-round exits, only once breaking a 70 average. For a man who just 2 years earlier was averaging over 100 on stage, it was almost unrecognizable. The numbers tell a grim story. Between 2022 and 2023, Jules averaged a healthy 90.3 across events. In 2024 and 2025, that's fallen to just over 81 and still sliding. He hasn't averaged above 90 inches any match since April of 2024. The Dutch Dragon, who once breathed fire on the board, is now struggling just to keep his darts straight. Off the stage, things aren't much easier. Prize money has all but dried up. In 2024, he earned just £4,000 on tour, nowhere near enough to cover travel, hotels, and the demands of life as a professional. He's been open about the financial strain, even calling on the PDC to rethink its prize structure so struggling players aren't left with nothing to fall back on. And then there's the mental toll. After the US Darts Masters in June 2025, Jules admitted in an interview that he was seriously considering walking away. His exact words cut deep. Once this run is over, the darts are going back in the case. For the first time, retirement wasn't just a distant possibility, it was something he was actively weighing. Yet even in the darkest moments, there are flashes of resilience. On social media, Jules has continued to engage with fans, often making self-deprecating jokes about his form. When supporters flooded him with messages after the UK Open breakdown, he thanked them sincerely, saying he was still trying. That honesty, that willingness to be open about his struggles, has only made fans more loyal. And there's another glimmer of hope, the memory of Barry van Peer. Years ago, Van Peer suffered his own very public battle with Dartitis, breaking down in tears during a televised match. For a long time, it looked like his career was finished. But slowly, he fought back. Today, he's competing again at a high level. Jules knows that story, and fans know it too. The question is whether he can find that same strength. Right now, his place on the PDC Tour hangs by a thread. He still holds his tour card, but without major improvement, it's hard to see how he keeps it beyond the current cycle. And yet, despite everything, he hasn't walked away. He's still stepping up, still competing, still searching for that one spark that could turn everything around. So, is this truly the end of the Dutch Dragon? Or could the man who once shocked the world find a way to shock it again? Jules's next chapter is still unwritten, and that's what makes his story impossible to look away from. Jules van Dongen's journey has been anything but ordinary. From a boy in the Netherlands throwing darts to avoid homework, to a bartender in Missouri playing local leagues, to one of the most informed players on the planet, his rise was as unlikely as it was inspiring. But just as quickly, the fall came, Dartitis stealing his confidence, averages crashing, and tears flowing on a major stage. Yet if there's one thing Jules has proven, it's that he doesn't walk away easily. Time and again, when people counted him out, he found a way back, winning his tour card twice, upsetting giants on the stage and showing glimpses of the talent that once made him the Dutch Dragon. Now, his future hangs in the balance. Retirement whispers louder with every defeat, but so does the hope of a comeback. Because in darts, as in life, the line between collapse and redemption can be razor thin. So the question remains, is this the final chapter of Jules van Dongen's career? Or the beginning of the greatest fight back the sport has ever seen?